Hello, how are you? You've probably heard that milk is essential for us to have strong bones. That if we don't consume milk and dairy products, this calcium, which is so essential, won't be absorbed, and that without it, we could develop osteoporosis and weak bones. But is this story 100% complete? After all, there's a very interesting paradox. The countries where people consume the most milk actually have higher rates of osteoporosis. So today, I'm going to explain exactly what's behind this. You're going to love this video. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, tell me if you have the habit of drinking cow's milk daily or if you've stopped consuming milk. Whether it's because of intolerance, an allergy, or even because you think milk might cause inflammation in your body. How does that work for you? Write to me down below in the comments. It's really important for us to understand a bit more about this issue of osteoporosis, right? It's a problem that affects so many people, especially older people, particularly older women. When we think about bone isn't a static structure, right? It's not a structure that's completely fixed. We often think of bone as just calcium, right? As something very hard, but bone is a living tissue and it's metabolically active. There's a constant balance between two structures. These are the osteoblasts, which are responsible for bone formation, and the osteoclasts, which are responsible for bone resorption. This is what we call bone remodeling, and osteoporosis happens when resorption exceeds formation. So you lose more bone than you build, and this doesn't depend only on calcium. This is a very interesting point. Actually, it depends on an entire system. We know that this system involves vitamin D, parathyroid hormone, estrogen, which is why women are often affected, chronic inflammation in the body, and even mechanical load, which is a very interesting aspect. And it's worth talking more about this later on. So when we look only at the issue of calcium, we end up oversimplifying something that is actually more complex. Now, regarding the question of milk, does it help or not? We know that milk is indeed a food rich in calcium, and it has good bioavailability. We are able to absorb about 30% to 35% of the calcium present in milk. But this does not guarantee 100% bone protection because our body needs, in addition to having calcium present, to absorb it, transport this calcium through the bloodstream, and fix this calcium in the bone. And this fixation depends on vitamin D, on vitamin K2, and as I mentioned before, on mechanical stimulation. Without this, calcium may be present and available in the bloodstream, but not going to the bone, which is where it needs to be. And in fact, it can have a deleterious effect, a harmful effect on our body, which is when the calcium gets fixed in the arteries. And this can cause even worse health problems, such as atheromas, those plaques in the arteries, which can lead to more serious health issues. That's exactly what we don't want. There's a very interesting issue, which is the milk paradox, right? I even started the video by mentioning this to you. Because countries with high milk consumption, like the United States and even the countries of Northern Europe, have high rates of osteoporosis. That doesn't necessarily mean that milk is the problem, right? You might be thinking, so if we eat a lot of dairy and get osteoporosis, I'll just stop consuming milk. That's not it. The point is that calcium alone doesn't solve the problem. In other words, just consuming more milk isn't necessarily what's going to help you with osteoporosis. Especially because when we look at these countries, we see that they actually have a low rate of converting vitamin D into its active form, right? Because they're Nordic countries, right? They're countries with less sunlight exposure. So because of that, there can be a very negative influence regarding this issue of calcium being fixed in the bones. We also know that many of these countries, especially the United States, have lower rates of physical activity, may consume more ultra-processed foods, and in the case of Europe, have a higher aging population. All of this is related to this paradox, and simply looking at calcium, at milk, at it going to the bone, at bone density, that's not going to be our answer here. Some people also have the idea that milk acidifies the body. You've probably heard that it removes calcium from the body. We know that this doesn't hold up. The idea that a specific food will drastically acidify or alkalize our body is somewhat fanciful because blood pH is very tightly regulated by the body. And we also know that milk can be nutritionally important because of its protein content as well. Protein stimulates IGF-1, which is a major player in how our body repairs and builds itself. Protein stimulates the production of this hormone in the intestine, and milk is a very protein-rich food, which helps with this. It improves bone formation and reduces the risk of fractures. So, the problem isn't the protein itself, but rather the metabolic context. This is a very interesting point for us to discuss. So let's talk about what actually helps you with bone health. If you have osteoporosis or if you already have osteopenia, which is, let's say, kind of a pre-osteoporosis. If you're worried because you have a family history, what should you focus on in your diet? Vitamin D is super important. When we think about vitamin D, obviously we think about sun exposure, And some people who live in countries or regions with more sunlight say, no problem, I don't need to worry about that. But you still need to make a conscious evaluation. Even if you live in a sunnier place or region, are you actually getting meaningful sun exposure every day as part of your routine? Because many people who live in these countries study or work indoors and in fact have little sun exposure. So that's something important. One thing you can consider is that there are vitamin D supplements and there are foods like fatty fish, egg yolk, beef liver, which are natural sources of vitamin D. If you're thinking about supplementing with vitamin D, first of all, you should check your blood levels to see if you actually need to supplement or not. And ideally, you should always do this with the guidance of a doctor or nutritionist because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It gets stored in our body, and too much of it can be toxic for us. I have a whole really cool video that goes into more detail about vitamin D and ideal levels, and I'll leave it down below in the description for you. Another very important thing for you to consider in your daily diet is vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is responsible for the carboxylation of your osteocalcin, which helps bind calcium to the bone, and also of the matrix GLA protein, which prevents calcium from going to the arteries. It helps direct this calcium more effectively. So it's almost as if vitamin K2 helps guide where the calcium should go, while vitamin D helps the body absorb and retain more calcium. That's why vitamin K2 and vitamin D are considered very important and complementary nutrients. Usually, sources of vitamin K2 are a bit harder for us Westerners to consume because they're found in natto and those fermented products that are more common in the East. But of course, it can also be present in smaller amounts in aged cheese. It's also found in egg yolk, once again, and in some meats. If it's essential for you to ensure a good intake because of atheromatous plaques and so on, it's important that you also talk to your doctor or your nutritionist about the possibility of supplementing with vitamin K2 to give you better control over the direction of the calcium you consume. When we think about calcium, the structure of calcium, what do you think about? Protein, right? Because protein is very important for building muscle mass, but not only that. It is also extremely important for the formation of type 1 collagen. And without protein, calcium doesn't have anywhere to bind very well. So it is super important in this context. There's also the issue of magnesium, which is often underestimated when we talk about bone health. It activates vitamin D, helps keep calcium inside the bone, and also prevents its deposition in soft tissues, complementarily. So pumpkin seeds, nuts, and dark green vegetables are fantastic. It's also important for us to consider other nutrients that have a smaller impact but are still important, such as potassium, which reduces urinary calcium loss and improves the acid-base balance of our body. Silica and boron help with the structure of collagen and improve that cross-linking of the matrix, acting like a kind of glue for our bones. And it's also important for us to try to control low-grade chronic inflammation as inflammatory cytokines increase bone resorption. And an inflammatory diet can accelerate the loss of bone mass. So it's very important that we try to control this low-grade chronic inflammation. One thing that is often underestimated, which isn't related to diet but rather to lifestyle, is the issue of physical activity itself. Because the more muscle stimulation you have, the more signals you send to your muscles and your brain to strengthen that bone. Because you need a stronger bone to support that muscular structure. So there's still another issue because people who are more obese with greater loss of muscle mass tend to have a higher loss of bone mass as well. And as you do weight training, strength exercises, water aerobics, Pilates, exercises aimed at increasing muscle mass, you can have an increase in this aspect of the bone component of muscle strength because the muscle pulls the tendon and the tendon pulls the bone. So this suggests a stimulus that activates the osteoblasts. So it's also important to focus on practicing physical exercise that stimulates muscle building, that encourages muscle growth to achieve this response as well. If you're unsure, if you're experiencing any kind of bone mass loss, it's important to know that our body always gives us signs, right? Weak nails, loss of muscle strength, pain, lower back pain, poor posture, even a decrease in height. These are warning signs for you to check how your bone health is in your body. Now going back to the main question of our video, right? Do you need to drink milk in order to improve this issue of osteoporosis? It depends. You don't necessarily need to consume milk, but you also don't need to stop consuming it. The only thing is that you can't rely solely on milk as your only source of calcium or nutrients to strengthen your bones. Also, remember that there are many non-dairy foods that are great sources of calcium, such as sesame seeds. I even have a video here on the channel teaching how to make sesame milk from scratch, which has more calcium than cow's milk. Dark green vegetables are great sources, and sardines, even canned, are an excellent source of calcium because you eat them with that central spine, right? So that's actually a very interesting amount of calcium, plus protein and even vitamin D. So it's also a very interesting source if you're looking for better bone health. So to recap, serious mistakes if you want to improve your bone health include having a chronically sedentary lifestyle. Not just not doing targeted physical activity, but also being a less physically active person throughout the day, having little sun exposure, low protein intake, high consumption of ultra-processed foods, and a deficiency in these micronutrients, which is often directly related to ultra-processed foods, since these are foods that are densely caloric, energy-dense, high in sodium and glucose, but low in nutrients, with few vitamins and minerals. So, if you can improve this in a broader way, you can often achieve improvement regarding this issue. This does not mean that this will replace the need for any type of medication you may be taking to strengthen your bones, and even less so, medical and nutritional follow-up. As I mentioned before, if you suspect that you may have osteoporosis or osteopenia, it is very important that you see a doctor because depending on the severity, some type of medication may be necessary. This video here is for informational purposes only. So tell me down below, did you know about the impact of these nutrients, of milk itself, on our bone formation and strengthening bone mass? Do you drink milk, plant-based milk, or any milk enriched with calcium or vitamin D? What do you do to improve this in your body? I would love to see your comment. Go ahead and leave your like on the video because that helps me a lot. Share this with anyone who might need it. Help us grow this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.